Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review, and today we're looking at a high-end IEM cable from Aries Audio. The cable is not yet released as of the time I'm recording this, but I believe it's due out around December. And the name of the cable is Ikigai. I'll explain shortly what that means, but to get things started, what you probably need to know is that this cable is going to retail for just shy of $1,000 US, so it's a pretty serious piece of IEM cable. If that sounds interesting, or you're just curious about how a cable can possibly cost that much, stay tuned and let's find out all about it. Aries Audio are based in Singapore as I understand it, and they've been making IEM cables and headphone cables for some time now. I'll put a link down below where you can go and check out all of the options available, and in time, the Ikigai here will also be in that list. For now though, let's talk about what you get when you buy an Ikigai from Aries Audio. First up, in terms of accessories, you get a little Hessian style bag that you can obviously carry your IEMs and cable in, but in reality you're probably not going to use that if you've got expensive IEMs, so maybe it's more of just a cable storage bag. We've also got a hard case here. It's a plastic hard case with a magnetized release system. So it's a nice touch. I think when you're spending this sort of money on an IEM cable, you expect it to come with something other than just a cable in maybe a plastic bag or even a box. Having that little bit of extra something is valuable. But I also question how much people will use this, again, other than to store the cable like I mentioned from the bag, because if you've got IEMs at the level of quality at which you're likely to spend $1,000 on a cable, you probably have them stored in some kind of Pelican style hard case. Either way though, I appreciate that Aries Audio provide this sort of packaging and this sort of carry case. I do think it adds to the sense of value that you get when you buy the product. On the inside of the little case, we've got ourselves the cable itself, which I'll talk about in a moment, and it's held together nicely by a leather cinch. It's got the Aries logo stamped into it and a brass or some sort of metal press stud there to keep it closed. I really like that. It's a nice way of closing up and keeping your wire coiled nicely without the issues of Velcro that gets stuck to everything and it gets fluffy over time. This is a much nicer, simpler way to do it. Now obviously you might be able to see in the video there that there's a pair of IEMs attached. These are my AF1120 Mk2s. The cable itself obviously doesn't come with IEMs. It'd be nice if it did, but it doesn't. So let's talk now about the cable, what it's made of, and also the name. I'm going to get to the name in a minute because I think it's important to understand the cable before I explain the name. Now I got this in the balanced format with the 2.5mm connector and MMCX terminations at the other end to suit the AF1120s. I'm personally also a fan of MMCX. I know some people aren't, but I do prefer it, and that's why I made this choice. While we're talking about terminations, I want to mention that the plugs that you get and the wire splitter are all beautifully made. They've got nice texture and detail. You'll see it in the Glamour video. They've got nice details on them and they feel really good quality. They're a gunmetal finish to match the color of the cable, and all in all, they're just really nice high quality pieces. At the plug end, the name of the cable, Ikigai, is actually embossed or stamped into the plug. Then as we travel up the cable, we've got a wire splitter that, as I said, is the same finish. It's metal, it's got that gunmetal look, and there's also a cinch there if you like to tighten up the amount of diverged cable underneath your chin. What's nice is that cinch is also solid metal, and when not in use it sits down next to the wire splitter and really looks like it's part of the wire splitter itself. The wire splitter once again is embossed, this time with the Aries logo. So everything has clearly been custom made for Aries, and it all looks and feels top notch, as you would expect on a $1,000 cable. Finally, if we trace our way up to the IEMs themselves, we've got, in my case, I chose the MMCX connectors as I said, and they're really beautiful connectors. They sit flush with the body of the IEM. There's no tacky red or blue or black or white markings to show left and right. There's just a very tastefully written R and L. And what's nice about those is that once they're connected to the IEMs, they're going to be in a position that you're not going to hear it because it's obscured by your ear or your head. So everything here is tasteful and feels very high quality. In the case of the MMCX, when I first put them on, I thought they were loose and falling off, but it's just that it's such a nice solid connection. It doesn't necessarily click into place, but once it's in place, it's really solid. Comes off obviously if you need it to, but is not going to fall off by itself. Now so far everything I've spoken about is nice, but it's nothing that explains why you would spend $1,000 for a cable. So let's start getting into that. The cable itself consists of an 8-core design using a beautiful flat weave. So I don't know if you can see in the video, but the cable itself is very, very narrow on that profile and obviously thicker on that profile. What that means is that it sits beautifully when you're wearing it, and it also doesn't want to coil on itself. Obviously when you put it down it will coil, but it's not one of those cables that's springy and pulling itself back all the time. That makes the cable a joy because it doesn't tangle up in the case, it unravels really easily when you want it to, but it also sits really nicely and is super comfortable. There's a couple of things behind that that are sort of the secrets to the Ikigai and what make it both expensive but also special. Let's start talking about the outside of the cable, the sheathing on the actual wires. Each of these wires is sheathed in a PVC coating that's also hydrophobic, which means it repels water. The reason that's important is for two things. One of them is it's going to stay clean, which is nice, but the other thing is that it means the sheathing protects the wires on the inside from any moisture. That means that the cables on the inside aren't covered in the enamel that most high quality cables are in order to prevent them from corroding. The result of not having the enamel is a beautifully soft, supple wire. As you can see here, it's just beautiful, it sits nicely, it's soft, it's very easy to work with. So that's all because there's no enamel. For those of you that are a fan of Litz cables, which do have the enamel on each individual strand, you'll obviously be disappointed now to hear that this is a stranded cable with no enamel. At first, I was a little bit disappointed by that, but as time's gone by, I'm absolutely happy that that's the choice Aries Audio have made because it just makes the cable such a joy. I've got a very expensive Litz cable that I use with my Noble K10s, and the thing is an absolute beast. It wants to coil its own way, it's stiff, it's rigid, the sheathing on it's quite plasticky and hard, so this is just an absolute gem in comparison. While we're talking about wires, let's talk about what's inside that sheath. And that is that it uses 7N purity copper. I'll come back to that in a second. 7N purity copper using ultrafine strands that are wound around a very, very thin, like a 0.1 millimeter, I believe, string of Kevlar. The idea of that is it gives the cable a lot of strength without adding to weight or rigidity. The idea behind this, according to Marcus from Aries Audio, is that the stranded cable is going to give a smoother overall sound that has better treble qualities compared to something like a Litz cable that has its own benefits, but you are trading off that smoothness and definitely trading off the suppleness. Before I talk a bit more about that and get into the sound quality, let's talk about what I just said about 7N copper. In all of my research to understand the various purities of copper over many, many years, trying to understand cables and why they sound the way they do or don't, what I've found in my research over the years is that there is a debate around how pure you can actually get copper in terms of its certification. There are question marks around whether 7N is actually a real thing. Now let me explain what the N means. So 7N, 6N, 5N, they're all versions of purity of metals. And what the 7N in this case stands for is 7 nines of purity. In other words, 99.99999% pure. That means that the purity of this cable in theory should be something like 99.999998%. or 7% at the end. As soon as you drop a 9 out of the number in one of the decimal places, that's what defines the 765N. So theoretically, this is an insanely pure copper. And whether or not it's 7N or actually 6N based on true certifications and testing probably doesn't matter because I have no doubt that it's top quality wire. So what we now know is we've got a cable here that's finished with beautiful terminations. It's a beautiful weave and design that's soft, supple and super comfortable, and in theory it's made with top quality materials. So the final question of course is, how does it sound? When I first put this on, my first impression of it was, yeah, it's okay. It was one of those cables that didn't blow me away, it didn't wow me. If you're someone who's used cables to adjust the sound of IEMs in the past, you may be used to specifically looking for a cable that boosts a bit of detail, whether it's through a Litz design, whether it's through using silver, silver-plated copper, some magical alloy, whatever it might be. There's multiple cables out in the market that focus on the change to the sound, being greater detail, more bass extension, more bass resolution, more treble air, whatever it might be. There's lots of information out there from manufacturers claiming these changes. Now in my experience, the changes are often true. Whether they're better or worse is another question, but it does alter the sound. So I'm actually really impressed that Aries Audio put out a flagship level cable for a fraction less than $1,000 US, and it's not about changing the sound drastically. It's actually about getting the purest version of the original sound coming through to the earphones. And at the same time, doing it with a beautiful and comfortable cable. So with that in mind, let me stop for a moment and talk about the term Ikigai. When I spoke to Marcus about this, he said it's quite a deep term. Now, technically, if you look up the definition, the English translation means something to the effect of reason for being. What Marcus explained was that the Ikigai is a representation of all of their efforts and knowledge that they've developed at Aries Audio. So this is kind of the culmination of everything they've done to date, and according to Marcus, is kind of their reason for being, to produce a cable like this that is very true to source, very comfortable, very premium, and extremely attractive. So with that in mind, as you hear me talking now about the sound quality, remember that this was the goal of the Ikigai in the first place, was to do all this with a sense of purity. I just want to interrupt the review for a moment to let you know that I've got some great new benefits over on Patreon for the channel patrons now. After consultation with the existing patrons, we've come up with what I think could be some really fun bonuses. So if you've been sitting on the fence about maybe supporting the channel but you weren't quite sure, now is a great time to head over, check out the benefits in each of the 4 tiers and see if they might be of interest to you. When I changed the stock cable from the 1120s and changed over to the Ikigai, I immediately noticed the smoothness. But it's not a smoothness that you might be used to if you've tried a cheap IEM cable in the past, where the details get a bit smoothed off, everything gets a bit mushy and a bit warm. It's not like that at all. In fact, what it does is it makes everything much easier to listen to and easier to listen through. The stock cable on the 1120s is a terrible cable ergonomically. Now, I've got quite an old version of it. I believe it's been updated since mine, but ergonomically it was a dreadful cable. It just wanted to coil. And so from an ergonomics point of view, the Ikigai is a huge upgrade. From a materials and a sound quality point of view, the difference is not quite so huge. And I don't mean that as a knock on the Ikigai, my point being that the AF1120 cable is really not a good cable ergonomically, but that doesn't mean it's a bad cable from a sonics and internal materials point of view. The Ikigai, on the other hand, just shows the level of class and refinement in the sound that comes out that really suggests the quality of what's going on inside. This is not a cable that's going to transform your IEMs. You'd be incredibly disappointed if you bought it with that in mind. This is a cable that will smooth off anything that shouldn't be there. So for example, I find silver-plated copper cables can be quite harsh and aggressive at times. In fact, I tried the Ikigai on the Tin Hi-Fi T2 Plus, which is a bit ridiculous because they're less than $100 and I've paired them with a $1,000 cable, but I tried it because their cable is a silver-plated copper. I also found the T2 Plus to occasionally get a little bit too bright. So putting on the Ikigai immediately brought all the best characteristics out of the T2 Plus and smoothed over some of the nastiness that the cable was actually bringing to the picture. What's important though is that the general tonal character of the 1120s or of the T2 Plus didn't change when I added this to them. It just smoothed out what was there and improved the overall presentation. I don't have any other premium high-end cables with the same termination to compare with the Ikigai, so I can't necessarily say it's better or worse than anything else. All I can say is that it's absolutely a cable you buy for comfort, for beauty of design and interactions with it ergonomically, and for a sound quality that keeps your beloved IEM sound intact, but brings it to the best possible version of itself. That to me is the beauty of the Ikigai, and I've never really come across a cable like this before that just brings out the best of the IEM you're attaching it to and doesn't try to influence its sound at all. If you're someone that's looking for extra brightness, extra detail, extra air, extra bass extension, this is not the cable for you to buy. But if you've got a pair of reasonably high IEMs, because I'm guessing you wouldn't be buying this for anything that wasn't already high-end, if you've got a pair of high-end IEMs and you're looking for comfort, ease of use, and spectacular sound quality in keeping with your current models, I can highly recommend the Ikigai for you. As always, I'll put a link down below. You can click through to the Aries Audio website, take a look at the Ikigai when it's released, and also all of their other earphone and headphone cables. They make some beautiful cables. I highly recommend you check them out. As always, if you've enjoyed this review or found it useful, please think about hitting the subscribe button and the like button. It really helps the channel out and helps me to keep bringing reviews like this to you. For now though, I'll leave you to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.